Hey, it's Casual Friday and welcome to it. I'm GM Jim. Over there is.
I'm Brad Wolf from Dire Den.
I'm Ryan Doyle from the Verdigris Table. Don't point
And.
at me.
Oh, I'm sorry. My apologies. That's rude. We are here this Friday to talk about stuff. That's what we do here. Stuff and things. Definitely stuff, maybe some things if there's time. Um, but so it's Friday. Grab your favorite afternoon adult beverage or combustible plant and come hang out with us. The first thing I want to do a little self promo real quick is there's still 1 day left to join my giveaway, the Dungeons and Dragons Red Dragon's Tale Lego giveaway. 3,700 pieces of D&D Lego goodness could be yours. Go to jimheskett.com/contest. Oh, look, there it is. /contest. And you could win that. It ends tomorrow, so go do the thing. Stop waiting. Enter now. Stop it. Stop waiting. Don't put it off. Do it right now. I mean, after the stream. Or no, open up a new tab. Do it in a new tab. Right. That seems the best option.
Multitask.
Keep this tab open. Just open a new tab.
Never stop watching.
Consume. Consume.
So, we have talked about almost all of the new 2024 D&D classes. The only one we haven't really talked about is the sorcerer. So, you guys want to do that now?
I would love to.
Yeah.
So, let me open up this. Oh, and also, stay tuned because after we're done talking about the sorcerer, I have a surprise segment planned. These two guys here don't even know what's going to happen. It is a surprise. It says in the agenda surprise segment. They don't even know.
I'm worried.
I'm practicing my shocked face.
All right. Let's talk about the sorcerer.
Or should I call it my thumbnail face?
Thumbnail face. No, that's not the wrong thing. Can I make this bigger? That's as big as I can make it. Okay. Sorcerers, more spells!
Yes.
Sorcerers can prepare more spells now than they could learn before. I didn't realize this. It was in the article on the Ranger. All 2024 D&D spellcasting classes are now prepared spellcasters. All of them are prepared spellcasters now. This was like one. I don't remember this being in the Unearthed Arcana, and there was just like one sentence about it in Ranger. But I was watching a video by XP to Level 3, and he was talking about it, where they're all prepared spellcasters, but like some classes can prepare all their spells every day, like Wizard, and then some classes like Ranger can just swap out one at a long rest. Did I get that right? You guys know anything about this?
That sounds right. Like, I haven't like done a deep dive to compare and contrast, but now that you say that, I'm like trying to piece together the different spell abilities in my head to try to, like, that sounds consistent with what I remember. Now I want to go look.
Yeah, I think that is how it is. That just some classes can only swap out one or maybe a few at a long rest. So they're sort of like half prepared spellcasters, which I don't know. I think I remember in an old Jeremy Crawford video he was talking about making everyone prepared spellcasters, and I was like, that just seems needlessly complicated. Not everyone needs to be. You know, part of the advantage of playing a wizard is that you have this massive library of spells you can pick from every day, and part of the simplicity of playing a sorcerer or ranger is that these are your spells. These are just the ones you have.
Right.
I feel.
Mentioned that in one of the class videos.
Yeah.
They did that to give more flexibility to PCs in general. Yeah, I would agree. It is more flexible. It's also more complicated.
Yeah. But that seems to be the trend, right? Is they're definitely giving you far more options as a player. There's multiple different ways to customize your character. That just seems to be part of the design.
Yeah. Also, so sorcerers can switch a cantrip when you level up. All spellcasters get that now, pretty much. But the big thing for sorcerers is at level 1, they get Inate Sorcery.
Okay.
That is the fancy pronunciation. It's innate sorcery, which is basically like rage for sorcerers. You can use a bonus action to surge in power for 1 minute, and when it's active, your sorcerer spell save DC increases by 1, and you have advantage on attack rolls for sorcery spells, and you can use it twice per long rest. I think this is great. I like that the sorcerer gets their own specific class thing. I do wish instead of a sorcerer spell, say armor class boost, because sorcerers desperately need that, being as squishy as they are. But I don't know. What are your guys' thoughts on this?
Thematically, I like it. I like the whole like Super Saiyan kind of vibe to it. Mechanically, I'm not convinced, but I'm eager to try it. Like, but that's always been my feeling about the sorcerer. Is like everything about the sorcerer thematically, I've always loved. The sorcerer has just yet across, multiple versions of the game to really live up to my expectations once I sit down at the table to play the character. I always feel a little disappointed in my sorcerer. So I'm really hoping that all these new abilities are going to add up and make me love playing sorcerer, because that's what I've been wanting since 3rd edition. I want to love playing a sorcerer, and I haven't yet.
Yeah, agreed. I think this, the class fantasy of like charging up, powering up, Super Saiyan, like yes please, right out of the box, yes please. And I think it's one piece of a puzzle that maybe makes Sorcerer feel worth it and not just like a worse wizard, unless I really squint. So I like it. I don't think it's going to make or break it, but I think it's an improvement. Yeah.
Nice. And it gets more buffs as you level up, which we'll get to in a couple minutes. Meta magic now is a level earlier. Meta magic selection can be changed when you level up, which is nice, because sometimes you take twin spell and then realize that your spell selection didn't quite work with that, or something of that nature. But this is one of those things, it's like that cool DMs have been house ruling since time immemorial, but now it's basically raw, like being able to swap out cantrips. Because I don't know what DM, if you were like, man, I took light, but we don't ever go into deep caves and don't ever have any reason for it, what DM would be like, no, you picked it, sticking with it? I would not play at that person's table for very long. Meta magic options have been tweaked. We'll get to that in a second, and you can learn more meta magic options as you level up. You guys have any thoughts on the meta magic here before we...
I like it coming online the same time we get sorcery points, because that level 2, like, you have sorcery points, and they're just kind of spell slots for now until the next level when you can actually use them for something. So it feels like cleaner design to bundle those two.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Subclasses is now at level 3 instead of level 1. I've said before how I don't love this, but this is how it is. Everyone is standardized now. Aberrant Mind largely unchanged from Tasha, except you cannot trade out your subclass spells. Okay. Clockwork Sorcery largely unchanged, except you cannot trade. Draconic buffs and extra spells make the subclass more draconic and robust. Wild Magic Sorcery, Wild Magic Surges are more reliable, and the table's been slightly tweaked. Let's click into that. Aberrant Mind, psionic spells can no longer be replaced with divination or enchantment. Telepathic speech is now more resilient. It does not drop you to incapacitated or dead. Psionic sorcery no longer affects material components that have a specified cost.
Yeah, I think the reason for that change, if I remember correctly, is that in kind of the optimization circles, the advice was to take the Aberrant Mind Sorcerer, and then every opportunity you got, replace one of the aberrant spells that they didn't feel were optimized spells. So over the course of a few levels, you would eventually replace most of those Aberrant Mind abilities. If that's the one I'm thinking of, I know there was one of those subclasses that you could. It would seem kind of pointless that you had a list of spells that you could then replace those spells, and over time, basically void out that list.
And clockwork spells can only be replaced, so this is the same, very similar thing with clockwork. Restore balance is now tied to your charisma modifier instead of your proficiency bonus. I've seen this a number of places that they are replacing proficiency bonus things with charisma modifier. Do you think that's so you can max out an ability earlier? You know, because you can get your charisma mod up to a +5 by level 8, but you wouldn't be able to get your proficiency bonus up to a +5 until, what is it, level 14?
Yeah, I think I think it's a way to kind of curtail multi-classing, right? Because your proficiency bonuses goes up no matter how many times you multi-class, right?
Right.
So making it an ability modifier instead of a proficiency bonus, you can max it out sooner, right? That's still kind of, it keeps you from doing the level dip as much. So instead of this taking 1 or 2 levels, you're kind of committing to take enough levels to make sure you get your charisma modifier up, right? and then not making it attached to proficiency bonus. It's not going to keep going up when you multi-class.
Yeah, it still makes the level dip worthwhile if your two classes share an ability score. Like, it makes level dip into warlock good for sorcerer because they're both charisma casters, but
right.
It's not as valuable for a fighter to level dip into a charisma class.
Right. And I think that keeps, I think the design goal behind that is to keep multi-classing on theme, right? It feels more thematic if you're, dipping paladin with sorcerer or dipping sorcerer with warlock. Like, they're still kind of in that same kind of, you can draw parallels to those themes, right? Versus like dipping sorcerer for some sort of shenanigans with a cleric, right?
Indeed.
I also think part of it is people know and think it's cool, like the ability scores, whereas proficiency bonus causes a lot of confusion, doesn't have the same like feel to it. Twin's still saying they like species abilities based on proficiency, which, okay, that's just like as you age up, like that makes sense to me. But it does seem like they tried to tie a lot of things to proficiency bonus, and then they were like, oh, we are spending a lot of time explaining what proficiency means. Maybe we'll go back to what people know better.
Species ability is based on proficiency bonus. DC 20 has something very similar to that. DC 20 has a much more robust species selection system where you get a range of abilities and you get points you can invest into them. And then also you can unlock additional points to spend as you level up, which D&D's just like, you pick your species, you get your dark vision, and you get your one other thing, and then you're done forever till the end of time, level 1 to 20.
Yeah. Well, some of the new species though will have abilities you get later, like Dragonborn. Their breath weapon, I think, gets more powerful as they level up.
True.
Now,
right.
And then they can get flight at later levels. So I think there is some of that design bleeding over. But DC 20 is also the one that has like the prime stat, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like you pick your prime stat, and no matter what class you are, you that becomes your key for everything, right?
Yeah, if you want to be a charisma sword swinger, you can do that in DC 20. Draconic sorcery. This iconic sorcerer class, blah blah blah. 10 additional spells. Command, fear, charm, legend lore. AC calculation includes your charisma modifier, 10 plus dex plus charisma, which is exactly the same as the College of Dance Bard. And your capstone feature. But this right here makes this subclass pretty irresistible, right? Since sorcerers can't wear armor, and so this is pretty much the only way to boost your armor stat as a sorcerer, right? I mean, aside from mage armor, which is okay at low levels. Once you're a 12th level sorcerer, having that armor class of 13 isn't that great anymore.
Right.
Yeah, if you want to be up in it on the front lines or close to the front lines, Draconic's looking pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do like that we're differentiating the spell lists and not swapping them out for but I like my flavors to be distinct, right? Like I'll take a twist now and then, but I want a Clockwork Sorcerer to feel distinct from an Aberrant Mind, from a Draconic. So I really want to see these spell lists too. And I think that holds especially true with the wild magic side of things.
And speaking of that, wild magic surges now trigger on a 20 instead of a 1. And wild magic surge tables be reorganized. I think we have that in another article. Let's talk about that in a second. You can still be transformed into a potted plant. Yay!
Always my least favorite.
Love a good Douglas Adams reference, though.
But their capstone feature, which we don't usually talk about here, because there's very little point in talking about level features for campaigns that only 2% of campaigns are ever going to reach. But Tame Surges allows you to trigger wild magic surge effect of your choice once per day, which there's some pretty good options on that table. Really, just like charisma adds to AC.
Yeah, I mean, explain it to me. I think charisma is kind of the most malleable thing because it's willpower in some places, and then it's I'm attractive and kind of suave, right? How does that prevent me from getting hit with an arrow?
People just don't want to hit you when you're so charismatic.
Look at that beautiful face. We can't mess that up.
Or I guess you could flavor it as intimidation, right? They're so intimidating or so distracting, maybe.
They flash those baby blues at you right as you swing the sword, and the Riz is too powerful, can't defeat it.
Oh.
All right, we go back to the main list here. Level 5, you regain expended sorcery points equal to half your sorcerer level after a short rest once per day. So you can, if you're level 10, you can always get back 5 sorcery points. Force of personality, yes, Twin Steel. I've heard that too. Yeah, it's definitely, charisma is not just necessarily attractiveness. It is how forceful your personality is. Get half your sorcery points back on a short rest, continuing this trend of giving every class a short rest thing, whereas I don't really think sorcerers had anything from a short rest before.
Did you get sorcery points back? I think maybe I have a high level sorcerer in the campaign for almost a year now, and I don't know the answer to that question. I'm embarrassed. I think they get. Hey, Chad, help me out. Does sorcerer get sorcery points back on a short rest? I think they do. Also, can we talk about why? Can we just have mana, please? This becomes this, becomes this, becomes this. Give me 1 bar. Give me 1 resource pool.
That's one thing I really like about Daggerheart, is that there are no spell slots, there are no grit points, there are no key or focus points. Everyone has the same 3 resources. That's armor slots, hope, and stress. And you use different abilities, tap into those 3 things, and it's the same for all classes. So, it doesn't matter what your class is; those are the resources you use to fuel your abilities. Wizards got spell slots, yeah, from Arcane Recovery. Is that what it's called?
Right.
Yes. I don't think sorcerers get slots, but I think they get mana magic. But I might be making that up, or my player might be cheating. I'm gonna have to talk to him.
You've just been getting swindled, Ryan, for the
Quite
last
possible.
year.
It's quite possible.
I'm playing a paladin in a 5e game, and there's 2 paladins in our party, and our dungeon master thinks that you can use lay on hands as a bonus action, and we just never corrected him. He's been letting us do that for like the last 9 months. We're just like, shh, we're just gonna not say anything about it.
I hope he's not watching.
At level 7, you get Sorcery Incarnate. You can regain uses of innate sorcery by spending 2 sorcery points. And now, here, a real great benefit of innate sorcery is that you can use 2 mana magic options on every spell. So you can, if you're a divine soul, you can cast Cure Wounds as a bonus action on the guy who's 20 feet away, which is pretty powerful. They do have that in the DMG's variant. Or in Storm Sorcerer mana up to level 21, so it worked pretty well.
Yeah, it's in there.
I've heard that before too. That people who've used that mana system, or what do they call it, a spell point system in the DMG.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard people who use that say it works well.
And it feels like some of it is making the classes distinct, which again is like I'm into. But I think the more you can make the mechanics the same, so a experienced player playing a new class doesn't have as much of a non-ramp. Like I don't have to explain. Well, this key points are basically your spell slots. Like how many times have I said a phrase like that to someone who was like struggling to understand how their class works, where it's just like you have points. These are your points. This is what you get to spend them on because you're a barbarian or whatever the case may be. You're a sorcerer.
Also, I just think it's confusing that you get 2nd level spell slots at level 3.
Oh
You
god.
get 3rd level spell slots at level 5, 4th level at level 7, 5th at level 9. Like, why can't the spell levels just match the character levels?
Yeah, I don't know why they didn't fix that. That was one of the things I fully expected them to fix with this edition of the game. Call them spell tiers or something.
Yeah.
At least change the name to get rid of the word level.
Mm-hmm.
If for backwards compatibility, I understand why they didn't, make the levels match, but at least get rid of the word level on spells.
Yeah.
Call it tiers or circles or something.
Yeah, and I mean, who knows if 5.5 fails miserably, then when we get 6th edition in 2027,
2027.
these things could be, they're going to give it a couple years, right, before all the dungeon masters who revolt, who don't want to run this overcomplicated system. But we're going to talk about that later on in the show, about whether or not we want to run this system.
Yeah. So Crusade games, I don't think we're advocating that like a 9th level character should have 9th level spells. I don't think that's the take. I think it's stop using the same word for different things, basically.
Yeah.
9th level characters with 9th level spells would be interesting, for sure. And that's kind of an acknowledgement that like, oh, this is probably going to 10, 11, 12, and then we're stopping. But yeah, I like tiers. I like power. Also, real quick, gang, I'm a little scared if we all agree to call this D&D 24. That paves the way for 25 and 26 and like yearly edition updates. I don't like it. I'm afraid we shouldn't do it. Don't let them.
I would think they learned that lesson with 4th edition, because 4th edition they were regularly doing errata, and it got, from what I understand, I didn't play 4th edition enough to care, but from people I know who did play 4th edition, that was a constant frustration for players because they were getting, Wizards of the Coast was doing regular like updates and errata updates, and it was too much to keep up with, which is why they eventually shifted gears into what did they call it? They didn't call it Essentials. It was something. They had a 4E Essentials or 4E, Elevated or whatever. I can't remember what the name of it was, but there was this of basically like a 4.5 kind of update.
and I think they were doing that because they thought 4E was going to be migrating to all digital. I also thought that they learned not to mess with the OGL when they switched over to 4th edition, so I'm not sure they learned anything ever.
Yeah, that's a good point, Ryan. Maybe they just can't learn lessons, or maybe the powers that be at Hasbro change over so fast that no one remembers the previous edition. Other than the designers, like obviously Jeremy Crawford and Chris Perkins and Mike Merles had been around for a long time. They remembered 4th edition.
Yeah, I'm with Twin Steel. I'm calling it 5.5.
Yeah.
Jury's out. Let's do it.
All right, let's talk about some of the a little bit about the wild magic. I've not actually read this article. What does it say? So, like we already said, okay, so the DM decided whether you rolled a 1d20 to see if you triggered a wild surge. In the 24th Player's Handbook, you, the player, can roll a d20 after casting a sorcerer spell with the spell slot. So it's up to the player now? I'm not sure I like this. Is this one of their stick it to the DM kind of?
I like putting the dice in the player's hands, especially if it's something that's going to impact them. So I don't mind this as much. I'm sure there were some DMs out there that did not like wild magic surges interfering with their carefully curated, novel outlines. So maybe that was coming up in some tables that I haven't experienced, but a wild Fred appeared.
Hey, Fred. Oops. Whenever I see how to RPG there, I want to do my Kiwi accent, but I will resist.
They hate that down there. Unless it's good. Is it good? I tried, folks. I tried to beat him.
I used to live in Australia, and when I moved to Australia, people there ruthlessly made fun of New Zealand accents, and I couldn't hear the difference at first. So I was like, why are you so mean to the Kiwis? I couldn't hear it at first. After like 6 months, though, I could definitely hear the difference.
Mm.
Fred, I'm not going to make fun of your accent, though. It is beautiful and perfect. Love wild magic, and I can talk about it all day. Allowing the player to force a surge is good because that's where they chose the class. All right, that's a valid point.
Yeah, and that was always the problem I had with the wild magic surge in the 2014 edition. Is it like it happens so rarely based on rules as written. So I feel like everybody came up with their own homebrew version of how often wild magic surges could happen.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah,
empowering players. It supports cooperative storytelling.
So my homebrew, now that it's no longer relevant, the spell level you were casting was what you would roll on the d20. So a stronger spell is more likely to create a wild magic surge. That always felt good in my mind, and I'll still do that with like when I tinker with magic items or stuff like that. I like that scaling.
The spell level, like you.
If I cast a first level spell, roll a d20. If you get a 1, wild magic surge.
Gotcha.
If you cast a third level spell, 1, 2, or 3 triggers it.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. Like one thing I never understood is how if you counterspell at 6th level, it doesn't give you any benefit. If the spell you're trying to counter is still higher level, then it doesn't benefit you to counterspell at a higher level above 3rd. Am I making sense? If you're counterspelling an 8th level spell, you counterspell it at 3rd level or 6th level, it's still a die roll either way.
Mm.
Whereas I feel like if you upcast counterspell, it should give you some kind of benefit because you're using more magical energy to try to counterspell, right? Does this make sense?
Makes sense. Upcasting is great, and there should be more of it or none of it. It feels like there's the wrong amount of spells being affected by upcasting. That's a great house rule.
Yeah.
Fred, just it always happens. I'm here for that.
And DC went up by 1 every time and then reset back to 1 after surge. That
I
makes
like that
sense.
too. I like that too.
seems
You're like building up a
yeah, it's like a
charge.
teapot.
Yeah.
Building up, exploding. Yeah, Jay, we've talked about this. It is a travesty that it's going to be 6 months between the PHB and the Monster Manual. And we are going to discuss in a little bit coming up on the show whether or not we want to, how we feel about actually running this new stuff. They don't actually have the Wild Magic Surge table here, do they?
They don't, and that's all I want. Give me that. I want it.
Yeah.
I covet.
It
I want it
says
almost as much as your Legos.
It says the table has been streamlined, but we're not going to let you see. You got to buy the books to see it. Many surges from the old table and condensed into fewer entries on the new table, which triggers on a die roll to determine a specific effect. So it doesn't. We don't get to see the new table.
Nope. It's 2024, and we've discovered nesting.
The new revolutionary ability to nest. You guys have any other thoughts on the sorcerer or wild magic?
Just a quick question, Jay. Does that mean you'll play it? You just don't want to DM it? Is that what you're saying?
It's a good question. It's a good question. Yeah, I put that topic on the agenda today, not because I have like a hot take that I want the world to hear, but because I want to know what you guys think, because I'm confused about what I'm going to do for that 4 to 6 month span.
Yeah. But yeah, as far as sorcerer, just reiterating my original point on the sorcerer theme, all of this stuff seems like it fits thematically. Just waiting to see how it plays out at the table.
Yeah.
Which I think is my just kind of general summary of all of this 5.5 stuff. Like on paper, so far I've liked just about everything I've seen, with the exception of some of the Ranger stuff. But we don't know until we see the monster manual, until we see the DM's guide, and until we actually run it at the table to see how all this really plays out.
Yeah. So are you guys ready for the surprise segment?
Ooh. Okay. Yeah. Hold on.
All right.
So I have made.
Ready for my shocked face.
I have made a little miniature game show that I am going to debut right here. And if it does fantastic, maybe we'll split it out to its own thing. If it does terrible, then this will be the last you ever hear of it. But yeah, so you watching at home, Brad and Ryan, I had no idea this was coming. I thought of this yesterday. And
wait, we're live right now? What the hell? Oh no.
So here's what we're doing. This is a little game show called Guess the Magic Item.
Oh.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you clues about a magic item. Chat, please don't spoil it for them.
Is this open book or?
So I'm going to show you a series of progressive clues. There's only 3 items. We're going to keep it pretty short. I'm going to show you 3 clues basically in order of obviousness, right? After the 3rd clue, then I'll reveal the item, but you can feel free to guess at any time. This first one is probably going to be pretty easy. You guys ready to go?
Yes.
Yes. Let's do it.
Here we go.
We're just shouting it out. Are we buzzing in? How?
I don't know. Do whatever your heart tells you.
Okay.
Item number 1. Once this item deals its extra damage to a creature, it becomes a non-magical arrow.
Arrow of lightning, right? Lightning arrow? Arrow of lightning? Nope.
Incorrect.
Ooh.
The creature hit with this item must make a DC 17 Constitution saving throw, taking an extra 6d10 piercing damage on a failed save, or half as much extra damage on a successful one.
This is somebody's thing. I was thinking of the javelin. Shoot. Does it contain a wizard's name from the 70s?
I don't know if I'm allowed to give you a clue, but no, it does not.
What kind of game show is this?
This is supposed to be the easy one.
I make up my own magic
All
items.
right,
I'm not.
here's our third and final clue.
Mm-hmm.
This is a magic weapon meant to slay a particular kind of creature.
Oh, is this the arrow of dragon slaying?
This is the arrow of slaying. Brad got it.
Yeah.
There are specific ones: the arrow of dragon slaying, arrow of giant slaying. There we go. All right. We ready for item number 2?
Chat, you can help.
You gain a +1 bonus to attack and damage rolls made with this magic weapon. That's extremely generic.
That's most of them.
You probably get it on this one. You can use an action to cause thick black poison to coat the blade.
Oh.
Dagger of Venom.
Yes.
Yes, it is
Yep.
the Dagger of Venom.
Yes,
I couldn't remember the name. I knew what it was. I just couldn't come up with Venom.
Now, this next one is probably the hardest, but there are going to be 4 clues.
Okay.
Your strength score becomes 20 unless it is already 20 or higher.
Oh boy.
Gir-
Belt of Stone Giant. Stone Giant gets you to 20. Okay.
This is the most vague clue. Your second clue. Any melee spell attack you make with this item deals an extra 2d8 cold damage on a hit.
Hmm.
See, that takes me in totally another direction. That wasn't what I was thinking of.
No.
All right. The third clue. This item has 8 charges. You can use an action and expend 1 or more charges to cast one of the following spells, save DC 18. Finger of Death for 5 charges, Sleep for 1 charge, Slow for 2 charges, or Teleport for 3 charges.
Yeah, it's. I think it's a hammer too, but I'm gonna say sort of cause because I don't know who's got the hammer.
That's a good guess. It is not the Sword of Cause.
Okay.
And the
Finger
fourth
of
and
Death.
final clue. Each time you cast a spell from this item, it casts the suggestion spell on you with a save DC of 18, demanding that you commit an evil act. Ryan, you were on the right track. It has
Yeah.
a person's name in the item.
Yeah, it's got to be the hand effect, no?
It is the Hand of Vecna.
Okay. Yeah.
Woo!
I didn't realize you could like slap people with the hand effect. No.
Yeah. Yeah, it says there was part of that sentence. The reason there's 3 dots there,
Like,
I edited out part of the sentence that
a
made
hand
it a
that's
lot more
holding this
obvious what
item?
it
Like-
was. Yeah, if you use
Yeah,
a weapon
okay.
that's holding this item.
Yes.
There's
Or
extra
yeah, if you
2d8
because it
damage.
becomes your hand, and then okay, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, I like this game now that I won. Yeah, let's go.
Yeah.
I'm on board. I hated it when we started, but now.
I've only given out the Hand of Vecna once, and the players immediately threw it back into the Far Realm. They defeated the bad guy with it, and they decided if the bad guy wants it that bad, they just tossed it right back into the portal to the Far Realm and left it there.
Yeah, by the time people have been playing long enough to make the Hand of Vecna viable, they probably know what it is.
Well, this was a bunch of relatively new players who didn't. They had no idea what it was. All they knew is that the bad guy cut his own hand off to try to put it on, and they're like, "This must be evil as hell." So they threw it back into the portal to the Far Realm.
What level were they?
Oh, they were like second level.
Yeah, I'll do stuff like that sometimes.
Brad,
I also
have you ever used the Deck of Many Things on a low level party?
Relatively low level. I think the lowest level I've done it. I think back in AD&D we did it like at 5th level, and I've done it in 5e. I want to say it was around like 7th or 8th level, but I've always wanted to start a campaign with it, like do it as session 0. So you know, even before you make your character. So if you draw the Void card, that just means the character you eventually make knows somebody that was lost to the Void, right? Do something like that where it sets up the campaign arcs.
In their book they came out with last year, the Book of Many Things, it did have some pretty cool stuff in it about other ways to use the deck, not just campaign wreckers. It had like a lot of ways to use the deck as like encounter builders, like draw these cards, like use it more like a tarot deck. You draw the cards and then lay them out, and the way they're laid out helps you build a campaign frame or build like an encounter. So it's pretty interesting. I've given my players deck cards. Early is level 3. Oh, Crusade games. You like the chaos.
And no, Twin Steel. I have vague memories of the head of Vecna story, but I can't remember the details now. But I'm curious now. I have to look that up too.
Well, the next item on our agenda, thank you for humoring me with the Guess the Magic Item video game. I expected to become a smashing success.
Yeah, I did terrible.
And every YouTuber out there is going to want to join the game show and become a part of it. Probably not, though. The next thing on the agenda is...
That's the thing. I have a lot of players who will either take 0 of those cards or all of them. So yeah, a limit is a good idea.
Not a gift. It's a cursed item. Yeah.
I like the deck of illusions. I'm 95% sure that's what it is. But like, there's another deck, and you put that in front of the players, and they're like, "This is the deck of many things. Don't touch it. We're doomed." And someone pulls it, and then it's like. I mean, there's some cool stuff in there too, but it's fun to like do the double bluff. Yeah.
In that book of many things, there's guidance for how to, take out the bad cards if you only want good stuff, or take out the good and bad cards if you just want the mid-range stuff. And there's a couple examples of lower powered decks, and I think the deck of illusions is one of those that's described in there. So Ryan, you suggested that we discuss this video from Bob Worldbuilder. What do you want to say?
Small YouTube channel. I don't know if anyone's heard of Bob, but he's doing good stuff. Check him out.
Up and comer.
Up and comer. Very good at YouTube. So I will boil down the message very quickly. The blank check, which I've been doing for a long time and never really codified it, and I think it's a very good, as a person talking about D&D on the internet, I think it's a very good exercise of like getting back to the beginner mindset and being like, oh, this is actually like an innovative thing if you stop and think about it for a second. So in the video, he's talking about how he'll call for a check and let the players determine in some sense what ability they're going to use, as long as they can describe how they're going to use that ability. I kind of come at it from the other approach, like describe to me how you're going to do this thing, and then we'll determine what the ability score is. And in part, it can be the player trying to use, their character skills and abilities to the best of their ability. But it's also opens things up for more creative uses of things, where it's like I'm like a barbarian can use intimidation, can use a strength-based intimidation check. That's in maybe it's an alternate role, but that's in the book. So opening it up for everything, as long as the player can make a convincing argument, one, makes a more creative game, and two, I think ups immersion. Now we're talking about ROLE role play, not ROLL role play, although there's a dark shadow to that.
So basically, as a DM, I would say, tell me what check, or I would say make a check to cross the bridge. And you tell me, okay, I'm going to do it with dexterity by doing X, Y, Z, right? Or I'm going to do it with constitution by doing this, that, and the other thing.
Right. That's a part. And I think it's kind of an old school approach to things, where in the video, Bob says, like, I've never seen a book that calls for a DC 14 check without saying it's dexterity or something. I think in a lot of old school adventures systems, you get a lot of, it's a skill challenge. It is a skill challenge, exactly. But I think even predating that, like the adventure not telling you what the check is, right? Like leaving it open, doing less on the dungeon master side, letting the players decide how they're going to approach things. That's when I will come in and determine, like, okay, what is the DC based on what they're attempting, and what is the skill or ability they're attempting to use here. Yeah, and this is how I've been doing it for a very long time, because one is less work for me in prep, and two, it opens the sandbox wider for the players to come up with creative ways to do things. And yeah, you get people trying to game the system, but you can put a squash to that pretty quickly, because you have to convince me what you're doing is possible in the first place.
Yeah, I guess I kind of do that in the sense of like if I'm, sketching out a dungeon, of my own design, I'll just put like it's a DC 15 to get through this door. Whether they're picking the lock, okay, well, DC 15 dex, or if they're kicking it down, DC 15 strength, right? So I just kind of set a difficulty level for the obstacle. So I guess I kind of do that when I'm kind of sketching things out ahead of time. But I don't do much ahead of time. I do I make most of those decisions on the fly at the table, kind of like you were saying. Like, just the player tells me what they want to do, and I'm like, okay, that sounds like this kind of check, and I kind of set the DC in that moment while they're rolling.
I think it's funny. I had never really considered about it this way, that you just tell the player the DC and then they can choose which skill they want to use, because what's always happened in my games is I will say, all right, give me a DC 15 investigation check, and without fail, unless they're good at investigation, they're going to say, can any chance I can do perception instead, or any chance I can do survival instead, or it happens every single time with athletics and acrobatics, right? Make an athletics check to climb the wall. Well, could I use acrobatics instead? And my response is always, well, maybe explain to me how you're going to use the way that skill defined to do the task in front of you. Because I'm always of the opinion that, like, if you can justify it narratively, then I will let you do it.
Yeah. So I guess Bob's recommendation is just to, kind of set out to do that ahead of time, right? Which is kind of similar to ICRPG, right? The room difficulty setting, right? That's Hank's, Hanker Infernals. His old tactic is this room is a 12 DC. Everything in this room is a 12, right? So it's a 12 to hit the monsters in the room. It's a 12 if you have to make a skill check in the room. Everything in this room is a 12. And then as you move through the dungeon and you get closer and closer to the end, those numbers just go up. So it's kind of gamifying, ramping up the tension by ramping up the DCs as you move through the dungeon.
I adore Index Card RPG. It is just the most clever system. There's so much good stuff in there. Daggerheart stole that kind of base difficulty from Index Card RPG, because in Daggerheart you have each monster has a difficulty, and that's armor class. That's also like for persuasion, NPCs each get a difficulty. No matter what you're trying to do, it's that. But in Daggerheart, they have locations too, which are sort of like monster lairs, but they're for any purpose. Like a tavern is a location, and the tavern has its own built-in abilities and encounters and a difficulty. So it is kind of like room difficulty from ICRPG.
Yeah, we've got a couple comments saying that this kind of incentivizes the shy players to come out of their shell and, and role play with their skill checks. So, I think that's a good intention behind doing it that way. I think that's clever.
And it's funny. He starts off that video by being like making a joke of like, do you want to be like Matthew Mercer? And like, please stop doing that. But I think like Matt Mercer's most famous line is, how do you want to do this? And, if your players don't watch Critical Role, you can pretend to have made that up and they'll love you for it. I did that for a while. But don't just save that for the killing blow. I ask players to describe stuff all of the time. How is your character? Like, what does it look like when your character casts Eldritch Blast? Right, especially, or like the first time someone casts a spell, yes. The first time someone uses a new ability, every time. But like, describe to me how you approach this door, right? How do you pick the lock right now? I use thieves. Okay, cool. How do you investigate this room right now? And it's like, well, I check the drawers in the desk for false bottoms, and like, I'll just auto success. if it's going to do it. I'll slide DCs on the fly too. I won't be like, all right, it's DC 14 because you're level 3 and that's about fair. It's like, if you try to intimidate this guy, that's much harder than if you try to persuade him, and he's pretty easy to deceive. Like I will have a sliding scale of DCs too, based on the skill.
I really like the kids on bikes idea of, I don't know, this may not originally be from Kids on Bikes, please don't at me, but the idea of having a skill check. So if you have if you're, to translate to D&D, if you had, say, a plus 10 in a skill, you could just automatically succeed on certain things. Like in Kids on Bikes, if you're rolling a d20 for your die, because your die size goes up in d20, not your like ability modifier, but you get better at something, you go from a 6 to an 8 to a 10 to 12 to a d20. And if you're rolling a d20, you can just automatically take a 10 on something. As long as you're not in a high pressure situation, you can always take a flat 10 on that roll. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a perfect way to represent sort of expertise. It's like, I'm so good at picking locks, I can automatically pick average difficulty locks, as long as I'm not, as long as I don't have somebody shooting at me while I'm trying to do it.
Yeah. Well, third edition did that. Like you could take a 10, you could even take a 20, but if you took a 20, it had a certain amount of time attached to it. I forget how long now. It's been years since I played third edition, but
yeah, and that's how I do taking 10 a lot of the time in my, actually I haven't done it in a long time, but it takes 10 minutes. And it's like, you can apply your passive score, right? If you take 10 minutes to investigate this room and you have a +8 to investigation, I'm not going to burn you because you rolled a 1. But it's going to take time to passively do this, and then you're building in like dungeon turns basically into a system that doesn't have it.
Yeah, because there is always that weird situation where you've got the rogue who's trying to pick a lock, and it's not a high pressure situation, but they roll their lock picking check and get a 6, and then they go, can I just try it again? And that's always a weird situation, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, and like how the RPG is saying, there's also just the kind of the problem of players trying to shoehorn, an ability in order to get the statistical advantage, right? But yeah, most of the time, if there's no time pressure, I'm not making you make a check anyway. Like if you're trying to pick a lock, but there's nobody around, why even make you roll? Just take the time to pick that lock, right?
Yeah.
So
I like skill challenges. I just really lean into the narrative part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've played at tables where the skill challenge became like this tactical discussion almost. Like, well, if I do this skill, then you can do that skill. And they spend like 30 minutes before anybody rolls a dice planning out the skill challenge as to who's going to make what skill, who's going to use what ability, right? And they just kind of map it all out before anybody rolls. And I'm just sitting there bored as a player, like, but I like it when it's narrative. Like, tell me what you're doing, make a skill check. Tell me what you're doing, make a skill check. Tell me what you're doing, make a skill check. And we kind of build a montage out of these skill checks. And if you can do that in a fast and efficient way, it feels just like a montage, in a movie versus this game mechanic that grinds the play to a halt,
Yeah, and you can get around that a little bit by saying, like, tell me what you're going to do. I'll tell you what you're rolling. Like a perception check, and they throw the dice down saying, time out, what are you doing? And that, I mean, in all things, skill challenge in particular, but that kind of not only counteracts that min-maxy tendency, but it also like pushes things down into the game and not the meta level.
Yeah. And I try to reward players who give descriptions versus, just telling me what skill they want to use. So I double down with skill descriptions, or like, when the player says, I'm going to do this, and they describe this cool thing they want to do, right? I'm going to give inspiration for that, or like I'm going to reference that again, one of my favorite things to do with that is if I have 2 or 3 players who are really good at making their, a cool description of what they're doing before they roll their skill check. As soon as we get to some point where somebody's stalled and not sure what to do, I'll go back and describe. So if we're going around the table, everybody's taking their turn. I'll go back and describe the scene based on those, like the description from player 1, the description from player 3. I'll slip into my description of what player 2 did, and then so I set the scene and bring it back to the player who's having trouble deciding what to do, and like putting the ball on the tee for them, right? And so I feel like that kind of rewards the players who have given me descriptions, and it kind of incentivizes the players who are either shy or hesitant to engage in the role play part to kind of get into the role play aspect.
I like that.
Crusade Games, this is how I feel when people want to add guidance.
Yeah, at least they're asking. I hate insight check. Blah, and they throw dice. Insight check.
Yeah, that's how it is with guidance. Guidance.
Yeah, you gotta touch them.
Interjection. Guidance. So next up on the agenda is backwards compatibility, which I assume here we're talking about 5.5 and 5th edition. Ryan, this was your topic idea. Do you want to kick us off?
Sure. What are we gonna do, guys? I mean, I've got 2 games going. Everybody's pretty excited about playing awesome new characters or just sinking their teeth into newness. But I am not making a character. I am just building a world for those characters to stomp around in, and I want it to feel somewhat balanced, challenging, something. Like there's going to be a very interesting interim where, okay, I can run Ghost of Saltmarsh with 2024 player handbook characters, but like, will that be fun? Is that why? I mean, I wish they had come out with an entire thing. I think part of pretending that this is all nothing new is that you're giving us a third of a game,
right?
And where's my box of give me an adventure, give me something?
Yeah, well, and I guess the reality is it's just too hard to do that logistically, because like even like Pathfinder just did their remaster, and they've got 4 books for their remaster. They came out with 2 this year, or 2 last year, and the other 2 came out this year, right? Mm-hmm. So they didn't give all of their game out either. And as far as the putting an adventure out, they could have done that like they did in 2014, where they hire a third party to write the adventure so that they can get that out at the same time as the player handbook release. But that didn't go so well, because that's everybody's least favorite 5e adventure, is the one that was written before the game was finished.
But they got options. It's not like there aren't third-party publishers putting out awesome stuff, dare I say better stuff half the time, that like are now being released on D&D Beyond. Like they have relationships with these people, even though they just tried to stab them in the back
last year,
14 months ago.
Yeah. The third-party content has dramatically improved since 2014, right? Like the popularity of the game and the competition has really elevated the overall quality of 3rd edition products, for sure.
On the question of is 5.5 compatible with 5th edition, I was listening to Sly Flourish's podcast a couple months ago, and somebody asked him that, and he said 5th edition is not compatible with 5th edition. Which is true, right? If you look at some of the stuff published in the last 3 or 4 years, it doesn't look nearly anything like the stuff in 2014 and 2015. And I feel like as soon as they started doing stuff like standardizing subclass progression to begin at 3rd level, you've broken it. It is no longer compatible because anytime that you need to have, because they say you can mix and match new classes with old subclasses, and I don't think that's true. I think that is a lie. It's corporate speak, and because I don't remember very well, but from what I understand, they said this at the beginning of 5th edition that it would be compatible, backwards compatible, and they said the same thing at the beginning of 4th edition. They started out saying it would be backwards compatible, and then they said, well, we're going to have conversion guides. It's like this is how it is in the software industry. When I worked in the software industry, they'd be like, we're coming out with Thing 2.0, and it's going to solve so many problems. And then they say, okay,
so many more.
okay, look, now our main goal here is to implement Thing 2.0 without introducing any new problems. And then they say, okay, look, our main goal here is to introduce Thing 2.0 and minimize the damage from all the problems that it's going to introduce. This is how it always goes in the tech world when they introduce new products. And like, this is what's happening in D&D. I feel like they're going to come out with all these guides about how to mix and match different characters at the table with new monsters, old monsters, new magic items, and old characters, and it's just not going to work. No. I feel like you're going to have a hard cut from one to the other, or your table's just not going to work, because if you got some guy who's like, I want to play a 2014 monk because I want the diamond soul where I get proficiency in all saving throws, playing next to a monk who's doing twice as much damage because they're using the 2024 monk, right? Jim, how do you have trust issues with Monty?
Yeah, Nacho got me. That's
I have some thoughts.
How much time we got left?
So back to the original question that Ryan was asking is like, what do we do for 6 months, right, between Player's Handbook and Monster Manual?
Yeah.
And I don't want to steal too much thunder because I'm working on a video where I give like some monster building advice on how to tweak your monsters to keep pace. But I think that's part of it, right? You're going to have to tweak your monsters.
Yeah.
And
I'm doing that already, though.
Right. Like most good DMs are already tweaking their monsters, right? Adding abilities, swapping out, customizing their creatures, right? So that's definitely going to help if you're already doing that. Keep doing that. If you haven't started, I've got a couple videos on that. And the other thing I think is resist the temptation to dive into the deep end. Don't let your players talk you into starting at 3rd level. Definitely don't start at 5th level. Play the game from 1st through 5th level first. Because we know that those levels are the easiest ones to contain characters. They're the easiest ones to adjust on the fly, right? Play low level games. Play 1st through 5th level, and use this as an opportunity to do all the things that you can't do in high level D&D. Murder mysteries, horror themed adventures, right? All those things that you can't do once players have 3rd level spells, right? Or they get much harder to do once you have 3rd level spells. Do the werewolf hunt, right? Before the players have access to be able to cure lycanthropy, right? They're supposed to have lower level versions of the vampire, right? Do a horror, a horror themed game with a big bad vampire for like 4th level characters or something like that. Take this as an opportunity to run all those games that everybody complains you can't run in 5e. You certainly can run them in 5e. You just have to do it on levels 1 through 4.
That's very solid advice. And Fred said something here. You guys need to start writing replacement material for Wizards of the Coast. We can't say anything, but we've talked. We've talked.
Stay tuned.
I'll say that. We've talked about some stuff. Stay tuned to this channel. That's all we can say about it at this time. For me, for what I'm going to be running, I only had one D&D 5e group that I was DMing for, and we switched to Daggerheart. But I haven't said anything about this on the YouTubes yet. But just as of a couple days ago, that group broke up. So I'm not currently DMing. Well, I'm DMing for the One Page One Shot Club, but that's rotating. So I don't have a weekly group that I'm running for anymore. But I think until the monster manual comes out and we had a few months of other people running, I'm not going to be running 5e at all. I think my intent at this point is to start a new group running Daggerheart, because I was just getting into it, been running it for like 5 sessions, just getting into, like, starting to feel comfortable with it, and I really like it. So I think that's probably what I want to do for the next 6 months, is run Daggerheart, and then once the monster manual is out and other DMs have 6 months of running 5.5, they can tell me if it works or not, and I might switch back if it's awesome, or I might not.
Yeah. Well, and I think I mentioned what I was doing a week or two ago. I've got 4 first through 5th level adventures planned. So I'm doing like a Studio Ghibli inspired kind of mystical adventure with low level characters. I'm doing like a Dark Sun inspired desert adventure. So I'm doing, like the advice I just gave, I'm doing multiple low level adventures, dabbling in other themes, right, that you can get away with doing with low level characters. So I'm doing that 4 different times till we get used to the system and the monster manual arrives. And then everybody's gonna pick their favorite character from those first 4 adventures, and then we'll run a level 5 to 12 adventure or something like that.
I love that, and I might be saying something wildly unpopular here, but low-level D&D, 5th edition, is the best D&D in 5th edition.
Well, it's the most D&D. It's the most like older versions of the game.
Yeah. Yeah. Low-level D&D is the best D&D.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I don't disagree with that. I think my favorite D&D level is level 5.
Mm-hmm.
I think it doesn't get better than that, because you get your extra attack, you get your 3rd level spells, you're powerful enough that you can fight interesting monsters, not just hobgoblins and kobolds. I think 5th level is with the peak. Everything after that is just power creep and balance. Power while balance.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I say don't. And I think that's why a lot of people start at 5th level, right? Because it is this kind of cool sweet spot, or they start at 3rd level, right? But I contend, no, start at 1st level, so that way, like the climax of your campaign is happening when you hit that sweet spot, right? Take that campaign up to like level 7. So like levels 5, 6, and 7 are where you are wrapping up your campaign. You're fighting your big bads. You're coming to conclusion, right? I think one of the secrets to running a good campaign is ending it sooner rather than later. For multiple reasons, like keeping the group together, not getting bored, not getting burned out as a DM. I think just overall shorter adventures, shorter campaigns are where it's at.
1,000%. 1,000%. One, because you earn it, like you feel that second attack when you've worked your way up to it, rather than starting with it or whatever 5th level ability. But I want to circle back for a sec, Jim. Sorry for your loss, man. I think it's important to acknowledge that, like, that happens to everybody, especially like we have authority because we're on your screen right now or whatever. But like, big part of D&D is life being complicated, and especially as adults trying to get 4 or 5 people in a room at the same time.
Yeah, it was a bummer because this group had been together since 2020. And it was some author friends of mine who I met through the writing circles, and there were 5 of us. We lost one a couple years ago, and we just lost another one this week, and I was running for 3 people, which I feel like is the minimum number you need. I don't like one-on-one D&D, and I ran all of Wild Beyond the Witchlight for 2 people, and that was fine. But I just feel like three is a magic number. And so now that there's 2 people in that group plus me, I don't feel like we should continue on. So maybe rebirth in some other form with those people or some of those people. But I don't know. Now is a Gandalf with a 5th level wizard. Interesting. I've heard that argument before.
I read a very convincing, it was probably a Reddit thread, that Gandalf is a fighter with magic initiate. Because he casts Animal Messenger, he casts Light, and he's running around with the sword most of the time. Like, okay, he's in a robe. But
maybe he's an artificer, and that's where he does all the fireworks at the beginning of the movie.
I like it.
If we're talking movie versus book, which is the thing. I made a video a few months ago about how an article that Gary Gygax wrote, where he basically said, "No, I didn't rip off Lord of the Rings," and but in the article, he wrote an article saying that. But then there's one sentence in there where he basically did admit I wrote like a salacious expose on Gary Gygax, actually secretly admitting that he did rip off Lord of the Rings. But in that video, I said that I didn't really like the books. Well, I want to say that I actually started reading The Fellowship of the Ring a couple weeks ago in earnest this time, and I'm liking it.
Okay, we can still be friends.
I tried Fellowship of the Ring several times and couldn't get into it. But maybe I'm older and wiser now, and so I am enjoying Fellowship of the Ring so far.
I mean, they're old, right? So they're slower, perhaps, and there's some. Yeah, I remember as a kid, I read The Hobbit as a kid, and then read Lord of the Rings, and then read The Silmarillion when I was like, I don't know, 11, 12 years old, and my like internal monologue started to like shift into this like King James Old English shit, and I was like, I'm in deep right now. And if I've had that experience. Infinite Jest did that to me like as a 20-year-old, but the 20-year-old Ryan was doing other stuff at the time too. But otherwise, like the Silmarillion is crazy deep lore building, and like if you don't enjoy it, okay, but like you have to recognize the cultural legacy that everyone has to pay to Tolkien. Like the reason Gary Gygax was saying that was because he was being sued by the Tolkien estate, and that's why we have halflings now.
Yeah. I did a deep dive into all that history for that video, and it was an entertainment lawyer representing the Tolkien, not exactly the Tolkien estate. It was sort of there was like the Tolkien media estate, like the people who were making movies off of it, not exactly the Tolkien estate.
That dope weird 80s movie.
Yeah. Yeah, the Silmarillion's a nightmare. And just so chat knows, since we've got 3 channels here, not everybody can see all of chat, so I've just been clicking. I've been trying to click everybody's comments just to get them to pop up, even though we might not be commenting on all of them.
And just so chat knows, I meant to say that at the beginning. I meant to say that over an hour ago.
So now that you know that, go back and watch the video from the beginning all over again. Go watch it once on each of our channels.
Please, that'd be great.
We all need the watch time. Andy Serkis. I am a huge Andy Serkis fan.
Ooh, that's
that
very
guy's
interesting.
Awesome.
Yes.
Well, I think maybe we're done here. I don't know if we have anything else to talk about.
Yeah, I got nothing. Have a good weekend. Play awesome games.
Right. So let's wrap up. So thank you for joining us. And this has been Casual Friday. Enjoy your weekend, and we'll all see you later.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a good one.
Bye.